Hey, welcome to Mooney Reads. My name is Beck, and today I'm going to be doing the Racing to Read book tag. This tag is a part of the Reading Rush, which I am in the middle of. If you're subscribed, certainly you've seen the reading vlogs. If you're not super sure what the Reading Rush is, I will leave some links to that in the description. The first question in this tag is starting line, a book that you started but never finished. For this, I'm going to talk about two different ones. They're both nonfiction, but honestly, there are a lot of books that I've started and not finished. I try not to totally DNF books. Like, if there's one that I don't really like that much, I'll still try to go until the end. However, I am really bad about starting to read a book, liking it, and then just not finishing it for no real reason. So not an intentional DNF. Both of these books I intend to go back and read, hopefully sometime sooner rather than later. One of those books is Assata, the autobiography of Assata Shakur. This I started reading in December, and I got a bit of the way through. This is a really intense read, so maybe that's why I ended up kind of stopping, but it's really good and super interesting. There are so many little details about her life and her politics that are just super fascinating. So I'm looking forward to actually getting into this. The other book that I started and did not finish is Over the Top by Jonathan Van Ness. This is a memoir. Jonathan Van Ness is one of the people in Queer Eye, if you're unaware. But again, I got about a quarter of the way through, and for this one, there is just some content in here that I just wasn't really in the right headspace to read. He talks about a number of different things in his life. Some of them are pretty difficult, and he kept going back to kind of this childhood assault that he dealt with, which totally makes sense to have in the memoir, to be clear. It just wasn't something that I was in the right mindset to read, but I would like to finish it at some point. I love Jonathan. He's definitely my favorite. So the next question is Sprint. What is a book that you read really quickly? And for this, I'm going to go with a series, and that is Heartstopper by Alice Oseman. When I first read this, I only had the first volume, and when I finished it, I was super disappointed, but thankfully I found out that you can read them all for free online. So the night that I started to read book one, I ended up reading all of them, everything that I could find online, all within a few hours. I ended up staying up until like 3 a.m. and just read as much as I could. And it was a really wonderful time. I highly recommend these books. I love gay graphic novels, but the way that this couple is written just goes above and beyond what I've seen a lot of the time. Like, reading this felt like I was reading fan fiction of a couple that's already established that I really love, and that's something that's hard to achieve with new characters. So yes, this is very beautiful, and I can't wait to own the other volumes. The next prompt that we have is Marathon, a favorite long book. This question was a little bit difficult just because I don't totally know what constitutes a long book, and I'll be honest, I'm really bad at finishing and reading huge books, like tomes. Like, I think the longest book, with the exception of like textbooks and some other stuff like that, the longest book that I've read is part of a book series that I'm not going to mention. However, I do have a long book. It is a graphic novel, so it's not as long as I guess it could be, or I guess it's not as many words as it could be. But regardless, that is On a Sunbeam by Tillie Walden. This book is 533 pages long, and it is amazing. Like, I read this book when I hadn't really read a whole lot of other graphic novels. I also really hadn't read a whole lot of sci-fi, certainly hadn't seen a whole lot of sci-fi graphic novels. Reading this was like being introduced to a whole new medium, not just a new genre. The artwork is beautiful. I love the plot. There are two different timelines that you follow. The characters are amazing. I would die for all of them. This book is also incredibly gay. I would highly, highly recommend this. The next question is Hurdles. What is a book that had ups and downs? And there are a number of ways that you could take what, like, ups and downs mean. Did it get, like, good and then bad? Was there drama and then peacefulness? There are a lot of ways you could interpret that. But I'm gonna go with emotional, and for that I chose Our Dreams at Dusk, Volume 4. I recently finished reading this, and it was so good. And there's a lot of character development that comes to fruition in this book, and so far as ups and downs go, there are two, like, kind of, I wouldn't call them parallel plots, but I'm also not sure if I would call them, like, foil plots, if that's a thing you can say about a plot. They work really well together, but they're like emotional opposites. And man, I cried for a number of different reasons while reading this book. It's excellent. This whole series is really good. I actually plan on rereading it kind of all together, hopefully soon. Next we have Finish Line, a book that you were proud to finish. And this one I had a hard time coming up with an answer for some reason, but I'm going to go with Beatrice Chestnut's book on the Enneagram. It is a very thorough book. There's a lot about background that I did not know would be there, and it was kind of a lot. But it also had a lot of information about the 9 different types. Actually, what Beatrice Chestnut does with the Enneagram framework is that she breaks each Enneagram type down into 3 different other subcategories. I'm probably not going to do it justice by explaining it, but it was super helpful for me. It definitely showed you 3 different ways that kind of this personality type could manifest, and it gets pretty intricate and intense. Plus, she ends up talking about all of the different personality types, so there are 9 different personality types that she goes into. So I was really proud that I actually got to finish the whole thing. I didn't just read about my subtype. I went out and tried to learn about everybody, even though I retained more about myself. Next we have Gold Medal, the best book read during a readathon. And this is a little bit difficult just because I would have to think back to all of them. I have only really participated in readathons starting this year, but I just went with one of the first books that I thought of with this question, and that is Don't Call Us Dead by Danez Smith. This is a poetry collection that I read during the Blackathon in February. It is excellent. In this, Danez Smith talks about their experience as a queer Black person who is HIV positive. They talk about the condition of Black people, particularly Black men, and how it impacts the community. They weave the community experience in their own personal experience in a really interesting way. I've also read Homie by them as well, and that was really awesome. Both Homie and Don't Call Us Dead were 5-star books, but I think Don't Call Us Dead is my favorite of the 2. And then the final question is Participation Ribbon, a book that you wish got more attention. And for this, I have 2 books. The first is The Deep and Dark Blue by Niki Smith. This is a middle grade fantasy graphic novel that came out this year. I have not heard anybody talk about it. I don't think I've seen any post about it online. If you know of somebody who has talked about it, please tell me who they are so that I can check them out. Like I said, it's a middle grade fantasy graphic novel, and the main character is trans. And the way that the trans representation is done in this is just really wonderful. A lot of the times in stories about trans people, there's this really big focus on like, you're not in the right body. There are all of these negative things. Often this, terrible thing happens to the trans person. Maybe they're kicked out of the house. But there wasn't really a whole lot of that. A lot of the experience that we see of them figuring out that they're trans is that they find a place where they really feel like they're at home with themselves. And that was just really beautiful. And on top of that, there's a really neat plot. The main character and her twin brother end up having to go into hiding because they are a part of the aristocracy, and the person who was in charge ended up getting murdered, so they had to escape getting murdered. And a lot of stuff happens. It's there are parts of it that are a little bit intense. There is character death on the page, so if you're reading this, especially for like a kid, just know that that happens. The other book that I think needs more attention is nonfiction, and that is Black Feminist Thought by Patricia Hill Collins. This is something that I think gets a decent amount of attention in the classroom. I've definitely read excerpts from Patricia Hill Collins in multiple classes. However, I do not hear about this on the bookish internet, especially as we're talking about, anti-racist texts. People talk about feminist texts, but no one is talking about Patricia Hill Collins. Part of that is because this was published in the 90s. Part of it is probably also because it's a little bit less accessible price-wise, although you could find it used and potentially in libraries. If you are at all interested in social justice issues, this is a text that you absolutely should read. It is more academic, however, the way that Patricia Hill Collins writes, she is intentionally trying to make it to where that most people could pick up this book and get a lot of the points that she's trying to make. She's basically discussing the fact that we need to accept Black women's canon. We need to look historically at what Black women have been saying, and if we do that, that tells us a lot about our society, and she breaks down some of the different things that we can learn from this, including controlling images, which I think that most people, even if you don't know Patricia Hill Collins, you don't know maybe the word controlling image, a lot of people still know about them because they are so widely discussed. So if you have heard people talk about media stereotypes, especially around Black women, they've probably been talking about Patricia Hill Collins' ideas. So I highly, highly recommend this book. So that is all that I have for the Racing to Read book tag. If you have read any of these books, let me know in the comments what you thought. If you're participating in the reading rush, let me know what you finished reading or what you plan on reading. Thank you all so much for watching. Bye.